Greetings to you viewers from across the globe. You're welcome to the show Viewpoint, where we discover perspectives and embrace dialogue. I'm your host, Odiawa AI, for Veegil Media. On the show today, we will be talking about the Independent National Electoral Commission, giving them another chance if the electorate will actually come to terms with that. Why? Because the just concluded general elections, which also accommodated the gubernatorial elections, senatorial elections across various polling units all over the country, witnessed the deployment of electronic gadgets for the electoral process. Now, this process was seen to be marred by some discrepancies, hence the generation of the discredited thoughts from the electorate all over the country that the election exercise was actually plagued with some discrepancies or anomalies. Now, the Supreme Court's decision on the discretion or the discretionary utilization of electronic transmission of results has flattened any desire for technology-driven credible elections, yet it is incumbent on the umpire to re-establish that confidence via automating the process at the next set of outings in the off-cycle elections in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa states. Now, in Kogi, Imo, Bayelsa states now, it is no news that the elections are coming up, counting down now from today, Thursday, up until November 11. Now, the question is, will INEC make sure that these loopholes which they witnessed during the general elections will actually be taken care of, to make sure they win back the confidence of the electorate? That's another question. With the off-cycle gubernatorial elections in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa states on November 11, there are worries on the credibility of the political race in these three states, particularly with the verdict of the Presidential Elections Petitions Tribunal, which was recently upheld by the Supreme Court regarding the discretion of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to electronically communicate the results on their result viewing portal. Now, there were questions as to how the results were being uploaded or transmitted, so at least the electorate and probably observers and even stakeholders at large will actually follow up justifiably with these results. But these anomalies began to make the stakeholders drop the confidence they had in the electoral umpire, INEC. Now, obviously, getting the ball rolling, INEC had budgeted 117 billion naira on electing technologies in accordance with the choice to deploy the bimodal voters accreditation system, the BVAs, and the result viewing portals in the 2023 elections. The sum represents 33.4% of its 305 billion naira budget for the polls. Now, according to INEC, election projects planned for the 2023 polls as reported by news sources. Now, we can hear all the figures which INEC has actually tabled for making sure that the elections are actually taken care of, not just from the voting exercise alone, but also to take care of cases in which the body might be taken into account to court, to make sure that these cases are actually taken care of by candidates or maybe the observers who have drawn candidates' attention and they are affected. Now, the INEC chairman, Mahmood Yakubu, had additionally, preceding the election, said there was no going back on the commission's commitments to utilize technology, and including the BVAs and result viewing portals. But to the dismay of Nigerians, results of the presidential elections were not actually sent electronically. And this was part of the petitions presented by the opposition parties at the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal. Now, if we would recall, we'll also remember that just last week, the 171 plus days battle between the APC and the PDP was not just actually because of the certification of results. It initially began by the discrepancies from the part of INEC, which was perceived by opposition parties, not only the PDP, but also the Labour Party, that actually the APC had actually manipulated the election in their own favor to make sure that they become the ruling power. Now, the judgments of the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal and Supreme Court, where President Bola Tinubu was reaffirmed as the winner of the February 25 presidential polls, clarified that INEC was under no commitment to send results electronically, referring to the 2022 Electoral Act. The Supreme Court held that the result viewing portal isn't a collation center and furthermore affirmed that the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal ruling that the only technological gadget that was compulsory for INEC to use for the election is the BVAs, which is the Bimodal Verification Accredited System. Now, to numerous political observers, the Supreme Court's pronouncement on the result viewing portal was at variance with INEC's commitments before the elections that technology would actually be deployed. While some also on their own part believe that the pronouncement was a setback on the additions Nigeria has made in democratic elections, notwithstanding though the tremendous assets on the technology, others communicated doubts actually on the credibility of the November 11 gubernatorial elections holding in these three states, Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa. Now, with these doubts which they have actually communicated or expressed, our question now is, do we, the electoral umpire, do we actually prove that they are right or they are wrong? Now, that's our question now, or food for thought, which we need to wine and dine about in our brains. Join me in the next phase of the show. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media. You're welcome back to the show. The show is Viewpoint and I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media. We were talking about in the first phase of the show about giving INEC a second chance, particularly the anomalies which have raised eyebrows in the just concluded elections. Now, the off-cycle elections which are fast approaching will also determine whether INEC is actually committed to winning or buying back the confidence of the electorate in these three states. Now, the National Publicity Secretary of the Youth Party, Ayodele Adio, said the implication of having an election with a results viewing portal as optional would damage the confidence that the people have in the electoral process. Now, how will this damage it? Now, according to him, there is likely going to be a voters' apathy in the coming gubernatorial polls in the three states, adding that this further puts democracy in retreat. He stressed that declaring that the use of a result viewing portal as optional has created a trust deficit in the electoral process. Now, results that are meant to be uploaded or transmitted are not properly done. And these are technological gadgets in which you impute your data, and the data imputed actually should be what you fed into the database, not the other way around. Now, Adio said that stakeholders in the next month's election should brace up to be vigilant and devise methods of recording the process to counter any funny games by INEC and the tribunal, urging Nigerians to stand up to the question the National Assembly for appropriating such a huge amount for the process that actually was totally redundant and which didn't make mandatory in the electoral act. Furthermore, according to him, if they allow a situation where the majority of registered or eligible voters stay away from the electoral process, then we will be electing public officers without proper legitimacy, and this could ultimately harm our democracy. Now, a situation whereby the electoral process is not actually allowed to function properly, whereby the who is who doctor the results of the elections. Now, people who are displeased will take into all forms of protest or dissent, thereby destabilizing the democracy. That's where we hear about electoral violence or electoral officials being wounded or put in harm's way. And then the electorate are left out in the cold. And it becomes a warfare instead of a civilized form of democracy whereby people should calm down and elect their candidates into office. Candidates who are not happy about the results of the elections come on board to destabilize the system. Now, also, Associate Professor of Political Science, Leeds City University, Dr. Tunde Hosseini, said the fact that the court had left the use of results viewing portals at the discretion of INEC is not an excuse for failure on the part of the electoral body to properly collate legitimate votes and return them. In furtherance to that, according to him, the reason for the law is not to cage or delegitimize votes, noting that even the technology is not possible. An analog approach should reflect the wishes of the people. Now, if we go back to an analog system of voting, are we actually moving forward or actually going backwards? This is a digital age. Even as a digital age, we should be advanced in the electoral cycle. And doesn't mean that being advanced in the electoral cycle, people come on board or candidates come on board or their stooges come on board to doctor results and manipulate results to their own gains, particularly when they see they're on the losing side. He said the police, political parties, voters, contestants are also involved in the election. All hands must be on deck to ensure a credible polls in the coming off-cycle elections. The off-cycle elections, of course, I have just mentioned in the 3 states, urging Nigerians to support and trust INEC to deliver a credible election during the off-cycle election come November. Nothing that expressed doubts even before the elections actually would create suspicion and non-acceptance of the outcome in good faith. I beg your pardon. Now, well, the November elections are already here. The off-cycle elections month would serve as a litmus test for the umpire. Now, who is the umpire? The Independent National Electoral Commission. Now, this litmus test, which they are actually going to carry out on these 3 states, Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa states, come November 11, will actually ascertain whether they willingly will want to buy back the confidence of the electorate subsequently on other elections, and also validate their independence and ineffectiveness. I'm Odiawa AI for Veegil Media. Thanks for watching. The show has been Viewpoint.